Steve, welcome to the show. We finally get to do this journey of non-linearity, ups and downs. Finally, welcome to the Adaptable Athlete Podcast.
My friend, it has been a non-linear journey getting here, but really appreciate coming on. And it's interesting because when you reached out to invite me on, I was really happy. And then I seen the quality of the guests, Javier, that you had on. And it was like, wow, like a little bit of imposter syndrome leading up to this, but really excited. I think we're going to have a good chat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're in that category yourself. You're doing a lot. We were just talking off air about all the stuff you're doing, and we'll get into that. We'll get into all that stuff. But I'm curious. I have to start you off with something that intrigued me. I looked at your site. Football, not tennis, right? We'll get into that. But I want you to talk to me about the athlete you worked with for 6 weeks on their serve. And then tell me what happened on match day after all those 6 weeks of rote repetition.
Yeah, so my journey was in football or soccer, I guess. Found myself into tennis, and I coached tennis in a very traditional way for 18 years. And I coached like every other tennis coach coaches. Just before 2019 and before lockdown, the world changed. I worked with a good player, and he was getting ready for national tournaments. And we spent 6 weeks working on his serve and classic tennis coaching, serving unopposed, no opponent. And over those 6 weeks, we worked on the biomechanics, the technique, and we got his serve into a really good place. And going into the tournament, super excited. This kid's good. This kid's going to do stuff with his serve. And we get to the tournament, me and the parents are sitting there all excited. Player spins the racket to see who serves first. Player wins the spin, elects to serve. Yes, come on, let's go. Double fault. Serve goes in, opponent kills it. Parents are looking at me. I'm looking at the floor. What has happened? Everything was great in practice. Great training block leading up to it. And it just fell apart. And it was something that always bugged me about coaching. Like, I could work on your serve in a lesson for 40 minutes. It looked great. Put you into a match situation, disappeared. Driving home after that event, the world closed down and we had lots of time in our hands. And initially I blamed the player, like most coaches do. I just can't handle the pressure. Match day, not mentally strong. Because I had a bit of time to reflect, I started to look at, you know what, it might be me. It might be my coaching. And that's when I started down the journey of, well, is there something missing for my coaching here? Is like something has to be missing, because it's not biomechanics, because I'm biomechanically pretty sound. I spent years studying biomechanics. It's not tactics. Tennis tactics are relatively simple. Put the ball in position where your opponent can't get it back. I had an S&C coach with the player as well. This kid was an athlete. Must be psychology. And that's when I started to explore psychology. And that obviously then led me on to ecological dynamics and stuff. But that was the genesis. And I've said on a few podcasts before, like, I pretended to coach for 18 years. And it wasn't until I found ecological dynamics and ecological psychology that I understood how to coach. Yeah, that's a pretty quick introduction into sort of my journey. But that kid and that experience of the tournament changed my career.
Thank you for sharing that, because that is like a really unique story, and you were truly at like a fork in the road moment. What was your first, like, outside of obviously feeling like crap, feeling like you let the player down a little bit, what was your first response after feeling that?
Well, again, like I said, my first response was to blame him. Like, he just wasn't strong enough. Like, when the pressure was on, he couldn't deliver on match day, which we see across multiple different sports. So my first response was him, and it's his fault, and he's not good enough, and he's not working hard enough. I was lucky at that point, in some ways, maybe unlucky, that we had time to reflect as a coach, because I didn't have much time generally. It was lesson from lesson, tournament to tournament. And it was that time to reflect. It was a case of, even at that point, I was quite successful and had some good players. But during lockdown, I looked at it and said, well, I've got 6 good players, but I coach 60 players. So why are only 6 good and the other 54 on average? Is that a good indicator of my coaching? And that's when I started to look a bit more at myself, my own coaching. It was a case of, well, am I missing a trick here with my lesson design or practice design? Am I missing something? There's a disconnect, something's missing. And that's when I started to look at sports psychology. And what I did was I enrolled in an online sports psychology course during lockdown. And I'm not academic. And I know people might think weird that now, because I'm in an academic setting, which I'll talk about, I'm sure. And I spent most of the course, my friend, Googling terms that was on the course that I had no idea about. And I spent more time on YouTube than I did on the course. And in that time of going on YouTube, I was making notes one day, and YouTube obviously has autoplay. And in the background, as I'm making these notes, a video came on, and there was a gentleman talking about transfer of training and skill acquisition and constraint-led approach. And I was like, oh, what's this? This was resonating because it was speaking to my heart of the pain point of transfer. And it was Richard Shuttleworth doing a presentation. And that random autoplay YouTube video changed everything. And it was a case of, well, what is constraint-led approach? What is skill retention, skill acquisition? Because in tennis coaching, we didn't really talk about it that much. And that was the sort of the start of the rabbit hole, as we call it, of looking at it from a different lens, from a intense, shouty, aggressive tennis coach to, am I creating the right environment for that player? So I think, yeah, that was a big left or right moment, or sliding doors moment for my coaching.
We have to praise the algorithm there. The algorithm led you to your path. I'm curious. So you talked about the 6 athletes that were really good and the others who were average. In coaching, we like to talk about the outliers and base our methodology on the outliers, on the best athletes. Can you talk about that a little bit, about what maybe the average, what they experienced when you started to change, or how your mindset shifted to not focus maybe on those 6, but also on the group as a whole?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we always believe that sort of talent is born in that part, sort of in that mindset. And the 6 players are really good because they're mentally strong or they can deal with pressure. And with the other average players, they all train the same way. They all had the same drills. They had the same coach. They had the same practices. So what was the massive difference? And what I find now, I coach, let's say I'm touch point maybe 40 players over the week. All 40 players are good players now. And they're all, I look at them a little bit different. Like, my players now are good problem solvers, good decision makers. They have good autonomy. So they're quite independent players. And I think back to those 60 odd players 7 years ago. They couldn't think for themselves, most of them. Most of them needed me there. Most of them needed me to tell them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I think that's been the biggest shift in my coaching mentality or methodology, is it's become less coach-led and more player-led. Because in tennis especially, most of the time the coaches in that tournaments were back at club or working with other players or at different tournaments. So players have to be a bit more independent in tennis compared to other sports where the coach or the manager is there on site. And I think that's been the biggest change in me now, is like those 40 players I work with across a week, they're independent. They can perform without me, but also perform when I'm there. And I think, going back to that story about the young boy, I think part of the problem was I was there and I had this expectation of the serve, and I didn't help the environment in that situation either as well. So I'm not too sure if that answers the question, but it's just definitely more player-led and less coach-led really now. Sorry, my friend, you've gone muted on me.
No, I muted myself. So sometimes a little inside baseball for everybody listening to the podcast. If I want to cough or, I'll mute myself, and then I forgot. But, I was going to say, you said a couple things that I'd love to zero in on and pull on a little bit. So I have watched tennis more casually. I'm sure there are some people who are going to be, in the same boat. What are some of the problems, like from a problem solving perspective? What are some of the main things when you're working with tennis players, and the main maybe problems or common problems that they have to solve during a match?
Oh, it's a good question. And it's a really interesting one, because I used to think tennis was really quite complex. And within tennis, we have lots of frameworks, lots of tactical frameworks. I believe it's relatively simple to some degree now, in terms of you just put the ball in a position where your opponent can't get it back. Otte Aragio, that's his quote for tennis. It's relatively simple. The challenge with tennis is the environment you play it in. Your opponent is forever changing. Like, I could play you now in the first set. You will change during the course of a match. You may go up in confidence. You may lose confidence. A pretty girl turns up and that affects how I play. I'm not playing so confident, or maybe too confident. The weather changes. So the biggest challenge for me with tennis is that it's that chaos, it's that adaptability, because the scoring system is completely unique. I will serve differently 40 love up if I'm 40 love down. My emotions will be different. How I view the world will be different if I'm 5 games up compared to 5 love down. That's what makes tennis so challenging. And so when I work on my players, it's not so much about the X's and O's in terms of you hit the ball here and this will happen. It's dealing with the chaos and being able to keep that level of perception wide, because when you're nervous and anxious, sometimes you just look to survive. But with intention and attention, we know if you're only looking to survive, then you miss opportunities to win. So a lot of the work I do with my players is all around intention and attention. Okay, what's our intention? Well, can you jam your opponent? Can you get them to play in line with the body? Because if you jam them up, you get them off balance, easy to win. If you stretch him and make them play outside the line of the body, off balance, more likely to win. That's really it. But then how to do that under pressure at a very high pace is all about just, we would use the word attunement, just getting them used to the environment, get them to bring their attention to what's relevant. Sometimes the score's not relevant, sometimes it is. So a lot of it is not so much tactics, it's about awareness. And again, I keep using the word adaptable, which is kind of good for the podcast, I guess, the adaptable athlete. Yeah, but that's what tennis is. And I think if you look at Djokovic, he is the perfect example of an adaptable athlete for tennis. And you may look at him and say he's changed his technique over the years. He hasn't. He's adapted his movement because he's got older. The game's got quicker. He adapts to different court surfaces. Playing on grass at Wimbledon is different to playing at Flushing Meadows at the US. It's different court, it's a different game. And there's not many sports in the world where you play on different surfaces. Like you might play on AstroTurf or grass, but in tennis we play on clay, which is completely different. So to be a good tennis player, you don't need to be a one-trick pony. Like you can't just have a big serve. You need to be adaptable, and you've got to be able to change things based on the environment as well. It's a complex game, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said there. I like to think about it almost like I used to play Madden or video games growing up, and you'd have an athlete. Their speed rating was here. This rating was here. Well, what happens is athletes, as Djokovic, as you age, things change. So he's adapted, and those other awareness or whatever arbitrary characteristic, right? It goes up if you were to imagine a video game, which I think is really really cool. That you're thinking like that. I'd like to go back to when you said keep the perception wide. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe what an athlete might be experiencing in competition during the stress, anxiety. It's a high stakes set. There's your girlfriend or whoever in the stands. Can you talk a little about how maybe one's perception might narrow in those situations?
Yeah. So in tennis, we tend to call it the fear of failure. So it's the fear of losing. And one common behavioral trait we see with players when they're nervous and anxious is they start hitting the ball down the middle. So they start taking less risks. They'll start to be a bit more cautious. They won't hit through the ball as much. And you see this a lot at junior level, but you also see it at top level as well. What I understand from my work within ecological dynamics is, well, when you're nervous and anxious, everything narrows, so you see less information. You almost go into that fight or flight situation and you end up looking to survive. But within tennis, if you're only looking to survive, you miss opportunities to win. And you miss those affordances, opportunities. So in tennis, if I'm looking just to get the ball back, I might miss a short ball because I'm not looking for it. And so what I do with my players a lot is we always try and make sure that perception is wide and our intentions are quite clear. Sometimes we have to survive. So if you smash the ball at me with a massive serve, I have to survive. I can't look to jam or stretch you. However, after I survive that moment, I've got to then broaden my perception and look for opportunities to win. And working with players, it's getting them to understand that. And the way I describe this to players is it's a bit like red cars. Like, how many red cars have you seen today? How many?
Well, right now, 0.
Why? Because you're not looking for them.
You're not looking for them. Yeah.
So your intention today hasn't been to look for red cars. So therefore your attention's not there. So with players, I say to them all the time, well, if you're not looking for the red cars, if you're not looking for opportunities to win, you won't see it because your human system will just look to survive. So when you're in those moments, and we know what those moments feel like, the heart rate goes up, we feel the tension. Okay, can you bring your attention to something more positive? So rather than thinking about, I'm going to lose, or I've just got to survive this next point. Yeah, but then you're going to miss opportunities. And we talk a lot with my players about being brave. And when you're being brave, you're still looking for ways to win. And what we see a lot within junior tennis is there's a lot of waiting to win in tennis. So players might be 5-love up in a set. The challenge with tennis, there's no time limit. So you can't run the clock down. So if you're playing football, American football, soccer, if you're in the league, you just run the clock down. You can
It's
play
your
safe.
ally, right? It's your
It's
ally
yeah,
there.
you
Yeah,
run it
yeah.
down again in soccer in England. Like if I'm winning 2-0, I can run the clock down. I can defend. I can survive. In tennis, you can't do that because there's no time limit. And what happens in that situation is I'm 5-love up. I start playing passive. All of a sudden now it's 5-3. Your momentum's up. Your confidence up. I'm stressed because I'm like how far ahead. And it's because I've been waiting to win. So again, one of the mantras I have with my players is we don't wait to win. Like we keep looking to win. And sometimes we lose, and that's okay because losing is information. And next time I'm 5-love up, and if I lose 7-5, I know exactly what not to do next time. So it's not about winning overall outcome. It's about that mentality, that intention of I go looking to win points. And it goes back to Duarte's quote of just put the ball in a position your opponent can't get it back. It's relatively that simple. The challenge is obviously the psychological pressure of competition. A bit like I always compare it to mixed martial arts tennis. Like your opponent's trying to beat you, you're trying to beat them. It's a one-on-one combat, and you've just got to try and find a way of getting over the finish line.
I've just had a visual when you were talking about that. About 1v1, the crowd in the stands. Maybe the umpire made a call you didn't like. There's just all of these things that contribute to one's behaviors. How do you try to recreate that? Or if you do try to recreate that in an environment where that maybe you can't have fans or some of the elements that you would in a high level competition. Is there any tips you have for coaches out there?
Yeah, we do lots within the center that I'm in now. Like we will actively encourage players at times to call the ball out when it's in because tennis is a weird junior sport. We have no umpires at most levels of tennis. So you umpire your own match. So imagine me and you playing a match. We call our own lines. Crazy because our perception, I want the ball to be out, you want it to be in. So I see it as out, you see it as in. You hit the ball on my side, it's my call. I call it out. The ball's that far in. You're raging. I believe it's out though. So what we tend to do with our training is we give our players like what we call a cheat card. So if the ball's close to the line, Javier, in this game, you can call it out. And then we manipulate those situations. And what we try and teach the players is at the end of the day, a single point will make a difference. However, how that point makes you behave over the next 4 or 5 points, 2 or 3 games can. So it's about the ability to reset, regroup. Easier said than done, I know. But we put those elements in there and things like I'm lucky because I work at an indoor center and we've got a PA system which we can pipe music through. So last week we put the music up really loud when the players were competing, and then we turned it right down. So we've gone from a loud sort of like a rave, basically, big house music going on, and the kids are dancing. But then you go to utter silence, and that changes the dynamic. Now the players are very self-aware; they haven't got the noise in and around them. So we would definitely manipulate the environment in that way. So we're constantly getting to change environments. 1 minute we're playing indoor, it's nice, and then we're outside and it's windy and the ball's flying everywhere, and we're okay. That's now we have to adapt. We get parents to watch from different positions because all those kids want to do is please their parents. And it's interesting because at my center we've got a balcony behind the courts, so only one side can you see your parents. Players perform better when they are facing away from the parents. So we get them to change ends. And so there's lots of stuff that we try and do just to throw in the chaos of the game. And like you said, it's just people turning up can change it. There's a very famous Andre Agassi story where he's at the French Open and he's playing well, and Bill Clinton was the president at the time, and Clinton turns up and Agassi just completely has a meltdown and doesn't know how to play. That happens every day in tennis, like when a coach turns up or a parent's watching. So we try and replicate those moments within just within our training, and it's fun as well when you're putting the music up and dropping it down, and the kids respond to it really well. And one of the things that we sort of try and have a common message here is our job as coaches is to make you uncomfortable, because if we make you uncomfortable when it happens in the real match, you know how to deal with it. You've got that experience. And I think tennis, like a lot of sports, a lot of the training is the polar opposite to the match court. Again, if you look at traditional tennis coaching, it's isolated practice, it's decomposed practice, it's all nice and patterns. Never happens in a match. And if players aren't prepared for that, the match court is different. And again, I said on the talent equation, sometimes we look like we're teaching ballet and these kids are going into an MMA fight, and it's a completely different sport. Hopefully my players are good cage fighters from a tennis point of view.
They're not going to actually be hitting each other with the rackets.
No,
Or,
no, 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 hopefully not. Hopefully not. But again, very, very much similar parallels with a one-on-one sport. Like even this evening, I was coaching a young girl, and we talked a lot about boxing, about trying to respect space. And if I want to hurt her, didn't physically, but okay, I've got to strike, and I've got to think about distance. And if I don't want to get hurt, I've got to create distance. And tennis is the same, and I think that's the way we try and approach it here. It's a competitive sport. People believe tennis is about rallying. We don't rally in tennis. Like I've never seen Djokovic and Federer go, "No, what, we're going to rally to 10 and then we'll play the point out." It's, can I hurt you with a serve? Can I hurt you with a return? And that's what we love about tennis, because it is competitive, and it's that one-on-one sport. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost in training.
And it's funny, there must be a shared affordance between you and I, because I was wanted to talk about, this unopposed practice, and I do want to get to that. But just to make a point about boxing and MMA, I was talking to a boxing coach yesterday, and we mentioned deception. And there's got to be an element of deception where maybe you are, looking like you're going to hit a forehand across court, but you actually hit it down the line. So that's just an interesting point. Is that something your players start to do naturally, or is that something you kind of guide their behavior towards?
Yeah, massively, because again, tennis is unpredictable, and we would look at it from a skilled intentionality point of view. It's looking at what's in front of you, and you act within split seconds. So I might be looking to go down a line with a forehand. I notice you start to shift across, I bang it in behind you. And the only way we can allow players to make those choices is by not being too prescriptive in our training. So when I design practice designs, it's to build a landscape of affordances, we would say, but it's multiple opportunities to achieve the outcome. It's repetition about repetition. It's a game, but there's lots of different ways they can interact. And what's really interesting when you start designing practices like that, more often than not, I'll have it in my head what's going to happen, and the opposite will happen, because I don't see the world through the player's eyes, and I'll see it from a coach and a 43-year-old coach's point of view. But when they're actually engaging with it, they'll see stuff that I've not even thought about, and they'll start playing shots that I didn't even think were possible from those angles. 7 years ago, I would have told the player off. "Oh, you go down the line on that shot. What are you doing? That's a terrible choice." But now I go, "Oh, that's really smart," because there's something in the environment that you've seen that I've not seen. And again, that goes back to the practice design. Like, you've got to create an environment where there's multiple ways to play, because tennis is so quick. And a lot of the time it is deception, because you can look like you're going to go one way, but then you start moving that way. I've got to change it, and I've got to change it in a fraction of a second. And that's where the skilled intentionality comes in.
So with this, we're talking about how important it is, this opponent, right? Having an opposition, that's what tennis is. But why do you think that so many coaches just love unopposed practice and doing things that do not represent the game?
It's path dependence. It's what they've always done. And again, to be honest, for 18 years, I did it. I did the basket drilling. Why did I do it? Because that's what my peers were doing. And I worked in a very, very popular centre with some really big name British coaches. And they all coached that way. And when you speak to them, why you're doing it, and it's the classic, we're building fundamentals, we're getting the reps in, we're building the muscle memory. And it's all that stuff that still is around today. And people will look at the Spanish system in tennis and say the Spanish have produced lots of players, and they do lots of unopposed practice and lots of decontextualized practice, and they've got some of the best players in the world. The bit that people don't see is how much tennis the Spanish players play, because they might do an hour of unopposed practice, but then they're playing tennis for 2-3 hours. So my hypothesis is, well, what's making the players better? The 1 hour of drills or the 3 hours of playing the game? Pretty sure it's 3 hours of playing the game. So there's lots of survivorship bias, lots of confirmation bias. And it is improving within tennis, like most sports now. I think we are getting closer to the academic research and stuff. But that pull of, I've always done it this way, or such and such player, Agassi, did thousands of baskets of a ball machine. He was the best player in the world. It must work. Yeah, but Agassi also played hundreds of thousands of hours of tennis matches as well. And I think, yeah, it's difficult. And I'm sure you're vastly experienced speaking to lots of sports coaches. I think we all feel that our sport's way behind others. But it's just trying to get over that path dependency of we've always done it this way.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think the other thing is there is a like a survivorship bias where you have one elite athlete and they're like, well, this is what he did and he succeeded or she succeeded, but it's like, did they succeed because of their training or in spite of their training? And we're also going back to what you said earlier. We're basing methodologies based off of you take someone in basketball or American football, for example, and there's like the peak of the peak that the species can generate. The athletic wise, just from a physical capacity standpoint. And then those athletes, I'm not saying that what they did didn't help them somewhat, but they probably would have been that way regardless. And it's also, to your point, you think of someone like Michael Jordan, and I'm not sure what he did from a workout standpoint, but did he get good because of the shots he took unopposed at some point, or because of all those games that he did against his older brother in the driveway in different surfaces and, 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 4-on-4, whatever it may be. So that's where I think coaches are we're biased towards the stuff that we can see and we can control and we can distill down into this is what X guy did and now I'm going to use this system or what I did, right? And now I'm going to distill it down to others.
It's so true, and I say this quite a bit as well. It's quite controversial, but I think sometimes as coaches we big ourselves up a bit too much, and a player is successful because of me. And I'll never say that any player is successful because of me, because I spend such a little amount of time with them. And when you look at, let's say, the top juniors now here in the UK, you look at their coaching hours and you look at their competition hours, they're competing so much. So surely that's a good indicator. If you look at the same players, a similar player who's not competing as much, they're not as good. So, but as coaches, we always, again, in tennis, we believe it's up to us, and you only have to go on social media to see I produced X number of champions and I worked with such and such. I think when Raducanu won the US Open, I think she had about 20,000 coaches at one point. And I think we all take credit for it, whereas I don't see it that way. Like you said, I think players develop outside the coaching. Obviously, coaching helps because coaching helps shape and guide, and there's a role for coaching. Coaching is really important. But for me, I truly believe players get better outside of coaching, and a good coach understands that, and they allow players to do that. Like sort of like you used there with Jordan, like did he get better at the rote repetition, or was it the hundreds of thousands of games he played of basketball and his own internal drive? I think if I look at a Djokovic, I go back to the word adaptable. He's so adaptable. So did he adapt despite the coaching he had? Did he just improve and become one of the greatest players of all time? It's not down to the coaching. And I think sometimes, again, I'll talk from a tennis point of view. I think sometimes in tennis coaching, we take it for granted. And, oh, yeah, I was the reason why Novak won 10 Grand Slams. I'm pretty sure Novak won the 10 Grand Slams.
Yeah.
Coach helped. Coach definitely helped. Coach definitely helped. But I don't think we can say the coaching is the reason why players are so successful. I think that's an ego talking, but that is controversial, I guess.
I agree with you. I think coaches inflate like their own importance, and I think there's a lot that we can do, but I do think that there is sometimes when people when I see I fix this person or I built this person, that to me, that's red flag language. And what people, unfortunately, it draws in people. But if you're an athlete, I'm like, I would be, or parent, I'd be a little bit wary. It's like, really, you did this? Oh, really? So I find it a little bit off-putting.
Yeah, well, massively. I did a parents meeting a couple of months back, and one of the parents asked me how many players have I produced, and I said, and they went, none. Just no. You've been coaching for 25 years, and you've never produced a player. I said, no, because I'll never take credit for the player, because especially in my sort of age range, so I work with like under 10s to under 14s. These players are with me 2 years, 3 years. That's such a small part of the journey. I can't take credit for anything they achieve after me or with me. And sometimes I get lucky and a national player might walk through the door tomorrow and I work with them and they may win nationals. I didn't do anything. I was just with them at the time. It's hard because I know when I first started coaching, I was that coach and I'd list on my website all the great players I worked with. When people ask me the question now, it's no one, because I generally don't know. Like, I don't know if I've had an impact. I think it's up to the player. I think if a player comes around and says, you know what, I achieved such and Steve made a big part, then obviously I'll take that. But for me personally, I've never produced a player in my life.
I like that, going against the grain there. So with the athletes that you work with, right? I don't know how it is where you're at, but in the States, usually athletes at this point will pick a sport and then that's a sport that they do. There's less of a more robust and there's less sampling of sports as a youth athlete. Have you noticed that trend for tennis? And if you have you noticed anything change with the athletes, whether it be physical or mental or both, of having more of a mono sport kind of culture?
Massively. It's a pandemic within tennis of early specialization. And I've had this conversation recently because our national governing body, they're currently changing their player pathway and they're basically encouraging early specialization from the age of 7 and more tennis at the age of 7 and less multi-sports. I see it from 2 point of views because number one, I grew up in a multi-sport environment. So I played soccer, football, but I played tennis, I played basketball, athletics. So I definitely played in multiple sports. 20 odd years ago, most of my players would play multiple sports as well. Now, most of my players specialize in tennis. What I notice a lot, their physical literacy skills aren't as good as they were 5 years ago because they're not getting that wide variety of different sports. Injuries are more common because they're repeating similar actions day in, day out. They're not getting netball, football, swimming, basketball, tennis. It's just tennis, tennis, tennis. Socially, especially with my sport, which is an individual sport, a lot of these juniors communicating with other juniors and supporting each other isn't like it was 5, 10 years ago. Because if you come from a team environment, you're helping each other, you're supporting each other, you're giving pep talks to each other. In tennis, even though you may train in a squad of 8 players, those 7 players are your rivals on Saturday at a tournament. So you don't have that sort of that friendship. They're all the downfalls of early specialization because we are trying to produce professional athletes at the age of under 10. And I, again, at the same parents' meeting, I made a statement saying, your kids aren't tennis players. And the room went really quiet. And I said, they're just kids who play tennis. And I think you're trying to professionalize these kids and they're playing 8, 9 hours of tennis a week. They don't need to. They don't need 8, 10 hours of coaching. They need 8 to 10 hours of activity. They need to be playing sports and they don't need 8 to 10 hours of coaching. Just have 2 hours of coaching and 8 hours of playing with your mates. It's a bit like what I said before, like you definitely get better with the unstructured stuff. And that's controversial because here in the UK, an underrate is encouraged to do 8 hours of tennis a week. And it's like, well, when do they fit in birthday parties? When do they fit in school? When do they fit in other sports? That can't be healthy. And I challenged the national governing body recently. I said, where's your evidence this works? Where's your empirical evidence? And to be fair to them, I won't mention names, but he came back to me and he said, we don't have any. We just seen what worked for a couple of good players. And it's like, wow. It goes back to my point before. If you're looking at works for 1% and you're not looking at the other 99%, we've got a problem. I think it's really unhealthy. And my ethos here at my center is you play as many sports as you can. If it becomes a choice between tennis on a Tuesday and football on a Tuesday, go play football if you're playing tennis on Thursday. And it goes against the grain. And again, a bit non-linear as always. But that's my thoughts on it. And it's scary. And I know in the US, the commercialization of junior sports, it's scary. It's scary how much pressure and how much money is being dragged out of these kids, where sports should be fun. And for me, from an ethical point of view, it doesn't sit right with me. Like, I don't think it should be a business junior sport.
It is really crazy. Like baseball, for example, is one of the worst ones. And, we're out here where it's going to be probably in the 80s today. So whatever that is, Celsius, warm, right? And so you can play baseball just about every day here. And so what you see is exactly what you mentioned. You see kids with a lack of an abundance of movement options, of very freezing degrees of freedom. They can't move. They only move, and this is really like a baseball player or like a volleyball player. So you ask them to do something novel, and it's like a volleyball player will shuffle, like kind of crab shuffle, and it's like, you don't have to do that here, or like we'll do like a donor sport, and you see that. And I've had conversations with parents, maybe 11 years old baseball player, and they have this hitting coach, a pitching coach. They went to, they trained with us, and they're expected to do sport specific training, which basically means let's make it look like the sport that they're already doing, meaning let me do more throwing motion. And so, and in this particular athlete, I remember he had shoulder issues, and it's like, he doesn't need more PT. He just needs to stop playing baseball for a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like, he doesn't need more exercise. And the list of exercises is about 20 things. I'm like, I would never do this. If you give me more than about 5 things, I still don't do it. Like, you give me 5 things to do at home, I'm not doing it. and I know it's helpful. So how are you expecting an 11-year-old? So yeah, it's a really big problem, but I know tennis is very much like get those 10,000 hours in, get as many matches in as possible. So it's a shame, but I'm not surprised to see that it's like that where you're at.
Yeah, but it's crazy as well, because if you look at some of the better players who came through, and I know we shouldn't use survivorship bias, but Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, they all played multiple sports. They didn't specialize in tennis until quite late.
Yeah.
So even if we are going to use those players as examples, they didn't specialize. But again, there's a pressure on parents of you must do these number of hours at this stage. And parents are scared and they will buy into it. And because at the end of the day, parents want just what's best for their kids, and they don't want to feel like they're not giving it all and not giving opportunities. And I think it's some poor messaging. And also what happens is, it's happened to me a number of times with players, they just burn out. And by the time of 13, 14, they're like, I don't want to be a full-time tennis player no more, because I've been full-time for the past 5 years. And you only have to look at their timetables. Like, these kids are getting up, they're training, they're going to school, they're training, they're going to bed, and it's repeat. It's like, well, where's the kid? Where's the childhood? And obviously there's a lot to talk at the minute with Norway in the Winter Olympics, and obviously the Norway idea and approach to sport about not being too competitive until the age of 14 or so. And I think there's something in that. I think we're trying to early specialize it far too soon, and it's hurting sport. It's hurting every sport.
It is, and I think I think there's a phrase, I'm probably going to butcher it, but success is a lagging indicator of what you've done previously, and that's kind of how I feel about what we're seeing now. It's like you see an athlete get hurt, and they get hurt when they're 15, 16, 14. They're not, I mean, it's rarely like an acute thing. It's like an accumulation of what they've done in the past, and it adds up, and you're the coach, and now you get stuck with it because this parent and this athlete in the system has kept them doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's brilliant from a marketing standpoint, because it's like, don't miss out, right? Don't miss out on my parent. I don't want to miss out on providing Sammy with the best possible training, that they could do. But to your point, I have worked with, like, Michael Jordan. He played baseball. I've worked with high level athletes that get paid to do this, and almost all of them have done other sports, or they come from a guy from Australia. He did every sport possible and then zeroed in on his favorite sport. So it's like, you don't have to do that, but sadly, that's the way it is right now.
It's tough, isn't it? And I think a lot of that comes down to associations, federations, and government bodies, because again, they are businesses at the end of the day. And like I mentioned before, I don't think it's ethical what we're sort of encouraging people to do. It should be the spice of life sport. It should be open to everyone. And like you said, people like Jordan, they all played amazing different sports. It goes back to injuries. In tennis now, knee injuries are rife, shoulder injuries are rife in juniors because of the amount of tennis they're playing. They're just not adaptable to other sports. And it's scary. But it goes back to sort of my upbringing. I grew up in a multi-sport upbringing. I didn't specialize. I think that's where my bias comes into it a little bit as well. But I think we should give them opportunities to do any sport.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I wanted to talk about some of your published work. So you've been a busy man. You're going to be a busy man for the foreseeable future. We might have to do a couple wellness checks on you, but I want to hear about your published work. And also, I know you do a lot of coach mentorship as well. So any one of those topics, I'd love to hear more about.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about coach mentoring, and it sort of ties into sort of my academic work as well. Because when I obviously changed my approach to coaching and discovered ecological dynamics, I then started to try to. So I work as a coach educator as well. So I educate coaches formally through national governing body federation qualifications and workshops. And what was really interesting when I started to work with coaches from an ecological dynamics point of view, I would do workshops with coaches and they'd all buy into it and go, oh, this is great. I love it. This is brilliant. And then when I watch him coach, they still coach the old way. And it was like, wow, what is going on there? Because you said to me that you love it and you buy into it, but you're still coaching in the opposite way. And that's what I'm sort of working with at the minute with coaches is, well, how can we get coaches to change their view of learning? How can we change their epistemology, how they view what learning is, from a traditional coach to a more ecological coach or contemporary coach, whatever you want to call it. That's what I'm currently working on at the minute with coaches across the world through mentoring and my platform. And that's what I'm currently doing in my master's degree as well is, okay, why do we coach the way we coach? And how do we move it? How do we get away from that path dependency, which we talked about before? And it's really interesting. it's interesting to see why we coach the way we do and what does it take to change coaches. Because I think me, yourself, and other people that have been on your podcast, we've all changed and we've all had that decision to go left or right, whereas a lot of coaches would like to change, but they never do. So that's the kind of work that I'm currently doing at the minute with coaches and part of my academic work as well.
What have you found is successful for keeping or helping coaches shift how they view their role, how they view learning?
A lot of it is expectations. Most coaches at the minute, and I'm just going off personal opinion here, a lot of it, they coach to parents. They coach to the balcony, I'll call it here. So it's more of a show because of what the expectation of what a tennis lesson looks like. And a lot of the time, from the work I've done, the research I've done, most coaches haven't got a theory. So they haven't got a learning theory or ontology or epistemology. They just coach the way they were coached. And they don't really know why. And that's really interesting as well. Because you coach, but you don't know why you coach that way. So, no, that's what I was told to do. So a lot of it is sort of trying to educate them and sort of show them a different way or a different approach and try and make sure that it's not a right or wrong approach. I'm sure you've had many of those conversations. We get into the theory wars, but it's trying to resonate with the coaches as well and sort of get a feeling of where they're at. And a bit like what Rob Gray says a lot, it's like, well, that's great, but have you thought about changing the cones for a human? And it's just getting to think a little bit different. But I generally think coaches need to learn skill acquisition straight away. That's like, for me, that's our job. Our job is skill acquisition. And here in the UK within tennis, we don't upon skill acquisition to level 5, which is the highest qualification of tennis coaches, which most tennis coaches will never get to. And it's like, but that's our job. Our job is
totally backwards.
It's mental. It's crazy. So for me, coaches only know what they know. And more often than not, I think that education isn't robust enough. I think they're just given frameworks, but not given the theory behind it. Now, I'm not saying every coach has to be academic, but I do believe there needs to be an understanding of skill behavior and how skill emerges, which just doesn't happen. And that's why you see the traditional coaching still going strong, despite so much research out there to say it's not maybe the most efficient and effective way. So that's what I'm sort of currently working on. It's trying to help coaches overcome those barriers and those expectations.
I think that's great because it seems like it is such an uphill battle for coaches to stumble, and I say stumble. Now there's more resources, I'm providing a resource, you're providing resources through your social media as well, which has a huge following. But I think it seems like there's such a hill to climb, but we have to have that as part of the journey. Like for you to tell me that that's the last thing, that's insane to me, because that should be the top thing. And then everything else descends from that, because once you have how you view movement, then the other stuff kind of locks into place a little bit, right? And you can judge, well, I don't agree with this. But the problem is that's taught backwards. So now they got all these tools, but no theory behind it. And that to me doesn't line up at all.
No, it's completely backwards. And I can't remember who it was, but I've heard the expression before, like the first day of coach training should be what skill acquisition is. Like the first thing you should learn is this is how movement emerges, and whatever theory it might be. I'm not saying it has to be ecological dynamics. It could be any theory, but there needs to be an underpinning and understanding of learning rather than this is a drill, this is a game. Okay, but how does that relate to the player? Like, how does learning take place? How does learning emerge? And I think from my experience, if I work with a young coach with no prior experience, it's really easy to get them to buy into ecological dynamics because there's no prior knowledge. If I get a level 3, level 4 coach 10 years in, it's really hard to break that confirmation bias and survivorship bias. And again, I'll quote Stuart Armstrong because he said on one of his podcasts, it's like trying to relearn a language again. But we've spent 10 years educating these coaches through formal education. We can't just throw it on them at the end because you're already set. Your bias is already in there. And it's really hard to change it at that point. Whereas I think day one this is skill acquisition. This is our job. Our job is skill acquisition. And I'm lucky in many regards because I get to speak at conferences and see hundreds of coaches each year. And I ask the same question at the start of every presentation. What is skill acquisition? No one knows. No one knows. No one actually knows what it is. I'm like, it's our job. And I think that's not a good insight for tennis coaches, because if you don't know how people move like we're in trouble. So I always say, Rob Gray, How We Learn to Move, that's the first book you need to read, because everything starts with the understanding of movement. The drills are easy. Anyone can do a drill, but you need to understand how that drill is perceived and how the player interacts with the drill.
Yeah, principles, philosophies over drills. It's got to be, but unfortunately, we like to do. It's like drills are candy. Drills are comfort food. It gives us as coaches gives us a little bit of a jolt of dopamine to know that we've got the best drill for athletes. But Steve, I would love to hear more about anything that you'd like to promote, that you'd like to tell our audience about. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate your time, but I'd love for people to learn more about what you do and learn more about the services that you provide and what you got going on.
Yeah, so I obviously have my social media at My Tennis Coaching. Generally pretty active on Instagram and LinkedIn. I have my website, mytenniscoaching.com. A lot of it's called My Tennis Coaching because it's my tennis coaching journey. So a lot of it is me just sharing my research, my insights. A lot of the stuff I'm sharing, what I'm doing with players. Lots of mistakes on there. And it was interesting because I was listening to your podcast the other week about the 3 mistakes you've made from your journey. And I was going through my website and I was looking at some of my old videos from 2 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, that's so bad. That is so bad. But it's part of the journey. And that's what I like. Again, I'm a little bit biased, but my stuff is authentic. It's real coaching. It's me on court with real players. Things go wrong all the time. And in my lessons, they go wrong quite often. I capture it all on camera and I put it out there for coaches to see, because I think, especially within tennis and social media, there's a lot of really good, highly produced content. I won't mention any names, but there's some famous tennis coaches who make it look like they turn water into wine in 30 seconds. My stuff's not like that. My stuff's authentic, but it's now getting outside of tennis coaching as well. So I'm starting to branch out and work across different sports. I'm speaking to a group of jiu-jitsu coaches in a few weeks, and I know nothing about BJJ, but coaching's just coaching. So a lot of football coaches, soccer coaches, some American sport coaches get in touch with me as well. So it's just coaching. So please don't feel like you have to ask me just tennis stuff. I'm always open to talk about coaching and journey. I'm not very good at promoting myself really well, but that's what I do. I just share my journey, what I do and what works, and definitely share some mistakes as well.
You're doing a great job. And I mean, I commented to that, a long time ago about how you do a great job with your social media. And you're like, well, it's not that much, you don't put that much like editing time. You just kind of put a camera, put a little layover screen text on it, and then that's it. So you definitely keep it authentic, my friend. And I was thinking, as you're talking about these different sports you're going into, I think a good question I'd like to know, is there anything outside of coaching or sports that you've taken, something that you like to do, something that you're interested in, that you've taken and applied to help you become a better coach? It could be anything from, I know someone that likes to study stand-up comedians, for example, anything like that you've taken and helped you become a better coach?
It's a really good question. I think the biggest change in me outside of sport is my little boy. So I've got a little baby who's 2, well, just coming up to 2, and applying my ecological knowledge to his growth and his journey so far has been amazing. So trying to apply it into fatherhood has been the biggest shift. And I'll tell a quick story because I know we're tight on time. I took him to the zoo the other week, and he's obviously obsessed with animals and he wants to run around and stuff. And I was really quite cautious and grabbing hold of his hand and making sure he didn't run off and stuff. And I was scared of him bumping into people and running into things. And my wife tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're being a traditional coach." So what do you mean I'm being a traditional coach? You're stopping him from learning. So what do you mean? Well, if he runs into something, he'll learn. If he runs into someone, he'll learn. If he falls over, he'll learn. You talk all the time about letting your players problem solve and decision make. As long as he's safe, let go of him. Let him explore, and you just guide and shape from a distance. I was like, oh yeah, that's actually a good lesson in parenthood. And every day I'm sort of just watching him and interacting with him, and it's fascinating watching him just learn how to do stuff like walking. Like, how do you learn to walk? Like, no one showed you how to walk. How have you just all of a sudden got up and start walking? Yeah, that's I think the biggest impact outside of sport is just being a father and letting go of the reins a little bit.
That's a perfect example, and kudos for for your accountability team holding you accountable to your words. So I appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you for bearing with me. We were supposed to do this for the audience for a while back, and then I decided to get sick, and we got busy. So thank you. I really value your time and your contributions to the podcast. And everybody, check out Steve's stuff because it is amazing. So thanks again, man.
And mate, I just want to say, obviously, I've been sort of kind of responsible as well for the delay in this, so I'll take accountability on that. But appreciate you, and again, you were one of the founding fathers when I started on this journey, and your podcast helped me massively, and I think the work you do is amazing. So massive thanks to you as well.